injustice. They were crying out. So the city was filled with confusion, and they rushed together into the theater, dragging them Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were Paul's companions in travel. But when Paul wished to go among the crowd, his disciples would not let him. And even some of the Azarchs, who were friends of his, sent to him and were urging him not to venture into the theater. Now some cried out one thing, some another, for the assembly was in confusion, and most of them did not know why they came together. Can you imagine that? A riot that you've joined, and you have no reason why other than it's a riot. I just want to take place. I just want to be a part of it. And it started thinking on me, how many riots have we had in recent years over, incidents, whether people feel like there's just been some kind of injustice done, that people just swarm together and they cause all these issues. And you really wonder how many of them really care about what's there, how many of them are really there for the purpose of supporting, or do they really even know why they're there, other than to take part of a riot, to say that they've been part of a mass event. And as I started thinking about these things, and this was just within a few weeks of us reading this verse, that I started seeing some articles come out. Obviously, we are in a very heated political climate here. And this has nothing to do with politics. Unfortunately, it will go into politics. And I am not going to say one way or the other how I believe, because everyone knows the two things you never argue with people about are religion and politics. The great thing is here, we can talk religion all day long and we're not going to offend each other. At least I hope. But as I really started looking into it, these questions came up. Well, what about the Christians? What about this group of people, the Christian majority? And I began to wonder, what does it mean? What group are they talking about? And that's really been bugging me and working on my brain for the last few months is, exactly are we talking about, and what exactly is that compared to what we are? Because I think if we understand what people are expecting and we understand what their terms are and what we do, it helps us to understand what people really need to see, to really understand what makes us different, to make us the Christian. It probably won't be majority, but to be the Christians. So as I started thinking about it and started doing research, I realized that whenever they talk about the Christian majority, it is usually talked about in politics. It's a political term. You almost rarely hear about the Christian majority in any other field except for politics. So it makes you wonder why. And as you think about it, you can kind of get the feeling that it's really is used to define a people of certain specific values. These are people that think a certain way. And then the question was, well, what exactly are those ways? And so it was really interesting. There was a lot of different ideas on this. So I went with one of the more respected resources, the Pew Research Institute. They do a lot of surveys. That's pretty much all they are based on, but they are very well known and have a very good backing. They're very neutral in what they provide, as opposed to a lot of these other sources that like taking information and twisting it to their own ways. And so I'm going to read just a few of the quotes that I read from one of their reports. And I think it's kind of enlightening to help us understand what people think about when they think of Christians. And especially when you're talking about Christian majority or even our Christian nation. So one of them, they start out, says Americans' views of what it means to be a Christian nation are wide ranging and often ambiguous. To some, being a Christian nation implies Christian based laws and governance. For others, it means the subtle guidance of a Christian's beliefs and values in everyday life, or simply a population with faith in something bigger. That kind of defines a lot. Um, so they went on through and they used specific respondents' answers to kind of characterize a group of them, group of responses. And they said one respondent with this understanding defines a Christian nation as people that believe in God and follow his words and beliefs. Another says a nation that loves God and others with no discrimination. And many respondents also express some version of In God We Trust or One Nation Under God. But I really began to wonder is how do you determine when a nation believes God? Because the problem is, as a nation, it doesn't make a difference. It's the individual and what we believe in that is important. Yes, you can summarize all of us as Christian, but that's not really a true answer. Us as individuals are Christians. Yes, God tried to have a nation of his with the Israelites, but they didn't always stay true to him. And eventually they were left to their own devices. When Christ came, created a new covenant, it was no longer about the nation, it was about the individuals. But yet we still have people that want to classify it as a national thing. It was interesting, just a statistic, and I'm just throwing it out there for what it is. It says 2/3 of Republicans and independents who lean towards the GOP, they said 67% say the U.S. should be a Christian nation. But they are less likely to think the country is presently a Christian nation at 30%. So we have a large group that believe that we should be, but most of them realize that we're not. I think that's kind of startling that people will say we should be, but we're not. And the question is, well, why is there such a discrepancy as in those numbers? They say another 12% of the public describes a Christian nation in terms of being guided by beliefs and values, but specifically without referencing God or Christian concepts. They describe a Christian nation as one where, example, overall, the nation as a whole has a basic faith and believes all people, regardless of race or creed, being treated equally. A solid belief in our humanity and willingness to act upon it. I don't know exactly what that means. They have a basic faith and they believe in all people, but it doesn't say how or why. But it seems to me that there's a lack of understanding of what a Christian nation is or what it means to be a Christian. They say a notable theme throughout the respondents' descriptions of a Christian nation is their ambiguity. It is often unclear exactly how much influence and control people attribute to Christianity in their responses. For example, respondents describe a Christian nation as a nation that upholds the teaching of God through Jesus Christ, or a nation that follows biblical values, or one that follows the principles of Christianity upon which it was founded. Responses like this do not clearly spell out whether Christianity would hold an official and privileged place or whether serve as a more general source of moral guidance. Then some respondents convey awareness that the Christian nation can take on a variety of meanings. According to one, it should mean that they follow the teachings of Christ. However, now it can mean extremist, money-loaded, white nationalists pushing their agenda. Another claims it should mean that the nation is guided by the teachings of Christ. But most Christian politicians wish to exploit religion in a manner Christ would not approve. Several even suggest that the meaning recently changed. I used to think it was a positive view, but now I view it as racist, homophobic, anti woman. Similarly, some respondents see the idea of a Christian nation as a political tool. As one respondent says, to me it means pandering to a subset of our population to get money and votes. Other descriptions in this category include ruled by religious propaganda, pretending to be a Christian, but yet not being Christian or to gain politically purposes, and a bunch of hypocrites who use God as a shield to do, say, wacky, zany things, and everyone's supposed to brush it off. What kind of a world do we live in? Where Christianity is a means to someone else's ends, as so many are starting to believe. If you look at research, and we've all heard this, decline in the church attendance, belief in any kind of religious being right now is on the decline. More and more people are just dropping it. They were giving just tidbits of some stories, some anecdotes of people that had been in various religious organizations, to include Muslim, where they left their religion and were saying, this is the best thing I've ever done. I'm free from everything. And I'm thinking, how is that free? It's like, why can you be so free and yet have nothing? You have nothing to look forward to. What is your future? So I had to ask myself, what in the world does it mean to be a Christian? Fortunately, we have a Bible that tells us a whole lot about it. What does it look like to live in this world? You know, James says in the section where he's talking about faith and works, he just mentions this one liner that doesn't seem to quite fit in there, but if you really look at it, it does. It says, you believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. So we have people that supposedly believe in God. Well, guess what? The demons believe in God too. We see case after case where, as Christ was healing people with spirits, they would call out and he would silence them, not to give away his name or to go out and spread anything. He wanted it to be done his way and the way he wanted. And I think it says a lot about him, but it also puts us into this place where we need to focus on what is it that we believe and what is it that we need to do. And so I was reading, my first thoughts always go to the Sermon on the Mount. And because that is such a good practical example, and we also can look at, and we're going to look at Sermon at the Mount and also the book of James, which is basically, if you read it, and we'll look at some verses, it is a partner. It's almost like he's taking the Sermon on the Mount and building on it to people that are more than just first-time listeners to it. He's trying to expand on it to explain some of the concepts. When Matthew 5:34 said, when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, what is the greatest commandment of the law? And he said to them, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and all your mind. This is the great and the first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love the neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. And as soon as I read that, I realized we have an acronym that we've used for many years and we've seen it many times. The acronym of JOY. You all know what that means, right? Jesus, others, and yourself. And as I read this, I realized this is what God is telling us, what Christ is telling us in this verse, is God is first. That is where we are to put our heart, our soul. In fact, he even writes, I probably should wait on that verse, because I'm getting ahead of myself somewhere in here. But I think it's important that we start looking at our lives at what's really important. And so when we look at Sermon of the Mount, I'm just going to just hit some highlights. As you look at it and you read through it, you have to understand, first of all, the Sermon on the Mount is not written to believers. There are thousands of people who have come up to hear Jesus speak for probably their first time. There's probably many others that have heard him other times, but there's a lot of first time people. So when he sits down, he starts talking to them. It starts off with the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers, and so on. And we start hearing this, and if from a point where I'm trying to get someone's attention in an introduction, it's a great way to introduce your speak, because you start hitting a lot of people. There were probably a lot more poor and medium middle class than, of course, there were the wealthy, just like it is today. But then he turns around, and as he starts talking, you start looking at he talks about these interactions with people. How do we relate to different people? And the very next section is where he talks about the salt and the light. It's like, you are the salt of the earth, or you are the light of the world. And in verse 16, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. It's about presenting yourself as an example to others. And like I said, this is for a lay person. This is not a person who's educated in the Bible, but here's how we want you to relate to each other. And as we go through, we start talking about, section on anger and lust and divorce and oaths, retaliation, loving your enemies. Every section of this for the next few chapters is all about how do we relate to people? How do we interact with people through the good and through the bad? And as we go into, if we jump down to James, we start seeing the same thing. If you look at in verses 2 through 9, we almost get a rehash of the Beatitudes. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let your steadfastness have its full effect. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God. I'm just going to kind of jump around a little bit as I go down. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast. And as you go through here, you start reading some more of these things. It's just a rewording of it, but he goes in a little bit more detail. And, I like, sorry, I'm having to use my phone for this. And so as he starts building on what are these basic things, he starts covering some things that will help the people there at the church be able to do or live their lives better according to Christ. And I think it's really important that, Timothy spends quite a bit on taming the tongue. our speech. And that is mentioned so many times. And so we're going to look through a few of these verses and look at what is expected of us as Christians. How do we live our life? In Timothy chapter 3, I'll read verses 1 through 10. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways. If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his own body. If we put bits in the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships. Though they are so large and driven by strong winds, they are guided by yet a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also yet the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire! And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set upon members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed, and has been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth comes blessing and cursing. My brothers, ought these things to not be so? And here just a little bit, just right below it, he talks a little bit more about some other things that come into play in this. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits. It is impartial and sincere, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So we just start seeing here a touch of some of the expectations for us. It's really about staying true, and I think we had some good points in Wednesday night's message and this morning on what does it look like to be a Christian and to live in a world that we are not part of this world, because we know we are not a stranger to this land. We are just walking through it. We're just a pilgrim through it, looking for our final resting place. So as we start talking about this, and the wisdom from above is fierce, pure, peaceful, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits. Logically, my brain went straight to Galatians 5:22 and 5:23, where we're talking about the fruits of the Spirit being love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there are no law. And those who have belonged to Christ have crucified in the flesh with its passions and desires. It's a matter of taking away those things that are of this world, clearing those out of our mind, our hearts, our body, and focusing on what's really important. And if you realize none of those things, I have never seen a law that's ever been written that prevents us from being joyful, patient, peaceful, There's no laws because there's no reason to. And as we start looking through it, as we start looking at as being our central spirit and the way we understand and interact with people, then it becomes much more apparent to how our lives start looking. In 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 9 through 11, 12, somewhere in there. Now concerning brotherly love, you have no need for anyone to write to you, for you yourselves have been taught by God to love one another. That indeed is what you are doing to all the brothers throughout Macedonia. But we urge you, brothers, to do this work with your hands as we instructed you, so you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. So we start seeing another aspect of it when we look at, okay, there's an internal part where we need to be a certain way to reflect, to shine our light among others. But there's also a part to it where we are not to be a burden on others. We are to work hard, to be quiet. And we'll see this in just a minute. But you are not to be a burden or to have to be dependent on others where you become a poor reputation, where you're constantly asking for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Let me just straight up say that. There are always times in our lives when we need help, whether it's spiritual, material, whatever it is. We will always find ourselves in that time. And I think that is a great way for us to show our love and be able to show that we are truly a family, is when we come together like this. But I think it's also very important that people see us for being people that are self-sufficient. I think is you were talking this morning, Mike, about the Amish people, and I grew up with some Amish communities close to me, not really. Melissa's parents are in basically an Amish community. They're right outside of one, and it's always great to see how they come together and help each other, and there's no question about it. And they are known for that. That's the amazing thing, is they are known for it. How many other people are known to come together and help each other as family? Are we even known that way? Internally, I think we are. I mean, I can't say much more than what I did. Thank you guys for welcoming us. But it's not just us. I remember the first time we visited here, there was a pounding that day that we were invited to. We did not attend that particular one, but I've seen this throughout. It's the way this church is. You take care of each other. You welcome people. And we don't always see that when we interact people in other places. So continuing down in 1 Thessalonians, in the very next chapter, in chapter 5, Paul writes, "For you are all children of light, children of the day. We are not of the night or the darkness. So then let us not sleep as others do, but let us keep awake and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, for a helmet of the hope of salvation. For God has not destined us for wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, so that whether we are awake or we are asleep, we might live with him. Therefore, encourage one another and build one another up as you are doing." And it comes back to what Christ said. We are the light of the world. It is through us that we shine and show people through our lives. The light cannot exist with darkness. The light chases away the darkness. You never see the darkness chasing away the light. When you turn on that light outside, the light goes. It spreads out. It's only when you turn off that light that the darkness comes back. And I think that's such an important thing to remember is that if we don't do anything, if we're not demonstrating or living our lives in a manner that's asked of us, then how can we let our light shine? And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and say, I'm a Christian. I think I can't tell you the number of times I've been out and I've started relationships with people, and for some reason, they just kind of click. People, I mean, and Melissa and I are the same way. We go to places and we go 2, 3 times, and all of a sudden they start knowing us. It's like, why? You don't do this with any other customer. I think that there's something about us that reflects. I don't know what it is. I've shared the story before where, one of my fellow soldiers bugged me and I kind of told him off, and that just threw him off because he was like, I thought you were a Christian. I never said I was. Is there some kind of aura that we set off or we spread out that people know that we're different? And I really think there is. I think when we go out there and we have this confidence in Christ and we have a lot of the attributes and we're actually living by those, I think people do see it. They feel a difference. They know that there is something different about you. You don't have to say anything. And so I think it's really important because this all ties back to what Christ said at the beginning with the Sermon of the Mount on how we live our lives. And, so as we start to wrap up, want to read one last section of verses. And this is Paul writing to Timothy, explaining more of the expectations of living the Christian life. And he writes to him saying, remind them of these things and charge them before God, not to quarrel about your words, which do no good, but only ruins the hearers. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightly handling the truth or the word of truth, but avoid irrelevant babble, for it will lead people into more and more ungodliness, and their talk will spread like gangrene, and among them are evidently some people that were. They have swerved the truth, saying that the resurrections happened. They are upsetting the faith of some. Our words mean something in the way we portray ourselves. And he continues in verse 20, now in a great house there is not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay, some of them for honorable use and some of them for dishonorable use. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from what is dishonorable, he will be a vessel for honorable use. Set yourself apart as holy, useful to the master of the house, ready for every good work. So flee youthful passions and pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace, along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Have nothing to do with foolish, ignorant controversies. You know that they breed quarrels, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but be kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring, correcting his opponents with gentleness. God may perhaps grant them repentance, leading to a knowledge of the truth, and they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will. But only if they see it in us, if they see that we are quarrelsome, if they see that we are causing problems, if they see that we're not living that quiet life, what kind of an image do they take away from it? And you've always heard first impressions, happen in just an instant, and people are judged by first impressions. And I used to interview so many people, and I'll never forget, of course, being at Harding at a Christian university. I'm working in public safety to where we were very service oriented. We were very customer service oriented. So we want to portray a good image. And I'll never forget this kid that came in to interview from for a job with us. He came in, and I found out later he had two big earrings in his ear. He was wearing shorts, and he had a Hawaiian type t-shirt that was just hanging loose. Bleach blonde hair. He was the epitome of a California beach bum. The bad thing was he was from California, Southern California, on the beach. Before he came in, the dispatcher or secretary told him to take at least the earrings out. But he still didn't make that impression. As soon as he walked in, I was like, really? You're coming to an interview for customer service dressed like that? And it went downhill from there. How much more do people look at us and see us for what we are in just that first instant, that first time that we interact with them? What do they see from us? And I'm sure we all have stories that we can tell of people that you can't believe the way that they treated someone, or someone that you even know that acted so out of character that you're like, what are you doing? That's not what we're called to be. We are called to be true, honest with ourselves. And we're called to be, I think, examples to the world around us. That is what God has asked us to be so many times throughout the scriptures. He doesn't tell us to actively going out and be missionaries. Some people are called to do that. But we are called on our own to be that light of the world, to be the salt of the earth, that when people come across us, they come away better than what they did when they first came to us. And I think that is so important for us to remember. And so just some words I kind of threw out as conclusion. Some of the words that I think we need to hold on to as we go through life is being peaceful, being merciful. Mike, you summed it up very well. I remember that incident happening, and that was the thing that amazed me, was the forgiveness that those people had. There was no ill-harbored feelings. And if you actually do some research, you will find how much they went out and tried to help the family of the shooter and so many others. It's like, I want to be known to be like those people, to have that heart to go out and help those. It also takes a measure of self-control. If we're upset with and frustrated with someone, isn't it so much better just to keep it to ourselves and not let it get out? And I think most of all, we just need to be patient with people. We all can live with a little bit more patience. I think I do a pretty good job, but there are times that I know I lose my patience. How much better would the world be if everyone had patience and had the respect for each other that we are called to be as Christians? And I think it's so important that when we leave here, that we remember that we are called to be people of God, and He has called us to be an example for Him and His Son. And through our works, we hope that people will see what we do, and maybe that will ignite that spark that gets them thinking about, maybe I need to look into what they're doing, because I want to be like that type of person. So if you have any needs, anything at all that the church can help you with, please come forward as we stand and sing, and go out into this week with an open heart and a happy heart, because we have a Lord that takes care of us.